In this video, I'm gonna be talking about accessories. So what accessories should you add into your photography gear in order to make the photography experience easier when you're out shooting? And I did want to make a note that this video is going to contain items only that help enhance your photography experience. There's going to be another video following this one that's going to talk specifically about accessories and items you can use to care for your photography. So things to help protect it in the field and things to do at home to help keep it safe and sound for future shoots. So this video is only about things that can make the photography experience easier. So with that being said, let's jump into these 7 items that I think are the most necessary accessories. Number 1 is a tripod. And although it seems obvious, a lot of people don't necessarily understand the use of a tripod. And the point of a tripod is in order to help stabilize the camera. This is particularly important if you're doing long exposure shots, which means you're trying to capture motion blur in your shot. We're gonna get into that a little bit later on in this course. It's also great for focus stacking. So if you want to learn how to take focus of multiple points of an image and stack them all together in Photoshop. And it's also great for exposure blending. So if you want to take a photo of the sky and the ground and blend them together, perhaps even do a sky replacement, these are all necessary techniques that need a tripod in order to be executed. So alongside that, they are great just to be able to hold your camera in place so you don't have to carry it around. My main setup whenever I go on a hike is I mount my camera on my tripod and simply carry my tripod around like it's Thor's hammer. And that way, at any moment, if I need a shot, I can just set up the tripod really fast and it's good to go. I do this for every single hike I go on with my camera. Whether it's a 1-mile hike or a 10-mile, I'm holding that tripod with the camera in my hand. Which brings me into a few important points that I'm gonna go over about what kind of tripod to pick out. Since we're specializing in adventure photography in this course, I would say the best tripod is a lightweight one. So you can find ones that are made out of aluminum, and if you have a big budget, you can even find ones that are made out of carbon fiber, which is essentially like you're holding nothing. So these are 2 great metals that you can look for when trying to find a tripod. In addition, I would also find one that's sturdy. So notice how I mentioned metals before. You want your tripod to be made out of metal. Don't skimp out and get a plastic tripod on Amazon, or else it's gonna fall apart really easily. I would say next to the camera, the tripod is probably gonna be taking the most damage in your photo shoots out of any of your tools. It's the thing that's exposed directly to the ground. You're gonna be putting it in funky different positions. You're gonna be knocking it into rocks. It's gonna be hitting things. It's gonna be underwater a lot of times if you're shooting in rivers, in lakes, on the ocean, it's in sand. The tripod is taking a beating, so invest in a high quality tripod. And most quality tripods are gonna run above $100. I believe the one I'm using right now is the Manfrotto Be Free, which was like around $150. You do not wanna get a $30 tripod on Amazon. I cannot stress this enough. Another thing you're gonna wanna look for in your tripod is a ball head. And this is essentially the point where you mount your camera on the tripod. The ball head allows you to swivel the camera in any direction. So this is great for whatever types of shots you're getting. So if you need to aim up or down, or even if you want to rotate the camera sideways to put it in portrait mode instead of landscape mode, the ball head makes this extremely easy. So look for a ball head when you're looking for a tripod. All right, so those are the main things you wanna look for with a tripod. Second item that is most important, again, is another tripod. But this isn't your mainstream tripod that you're gonna be using on every shoot. This is what I like to call the flexible tripod. And you could find these, they're generally about a foot tall, and they have 3 legs that pop out, but the catch is you can bend them in any direction. And these tripods are perfect for shoots where you want to mount your camera on a tree branch, on a rail, or even if you want to get really close to the ground. Most tripods nowadays have about a 1-foot stand that makes it so you can't get any closer to the ground than that. However, if you get a flexible tripod, you can get extremely close to the ground, which is essential if you're going to do focus stacking and get really close to objects, and even if you want to get into macro photography. So flexible tripod, not something I take on every shoot. I take it on shoots where I know I'm going to be using it, which honestly isn't often, but it is there if I need it. And it's also a great tripod if you want to be vlogging. You can hold it like this and it won't be nearly as clunky as the big tripod. So first two things, tripods. The third item that I would recommend is a small RGB light. So it doesn't have to be a big studio light or anything like that, just a small little light about this big that you can put in your backpack if you plan on doing night photography and you want to light a certain scene up. So for example, if you want to light up an arch, like this photo right here taken at Arches National Park, or if you want to light up a particular rock structure, or even if you want to do portraits, this is a great siding light that's just really flexible and you could bring around. That's just handy to have for a variety of situations. It can even be used for hiking at night if you want to clear out a big area, perhaps set up some kind of photo shoot. You can just put this on a little tripod and just light up an entire area. Also great for campsites. So essential item, RGB light. And notice how I said RGB. So this means it can go through the entire color spectrum. And the reason I like getting these is just they're usually not more expensive than just the basic lights, and they're great for portraits. So if you want to do one of those cool shoots where you have like red on one half of the face and blue on the other half, having the RGB light is perfect for this. So third item, RGB light. The fourth item I'd recommend is called an intervalometer, which sounds intense, but it's actually a really basic tool that is great for a variety of different things. For one, it's great for time lapses. So it's basically a tool and you connect this cord into your camera and it allows you to set your camera on a timer. So you could say like, take one photo every 1 second for 300 shots. And then you program that and then your camera will just go away and start shooting. This is great if you're doing self-portraits. So if you want to go stand off in the distance on a cliff overlooking it, you can just set your camera on an intervalometer and boom, it'll take the photos for you, and then you can just come back and pick out the best photos to edit and post. One thing to keep in mind though is that a lot of higher end cameras actually now have this feature built in. So before you buy one, check to see if your camera has this feature already built in for you. Another great thing that these can be used for is for extremely long exposures. Most cameras can only expose for about 30 seconds, which, as we're going to go through later in this course, means you keep the shutter open for 30 seconds and it will capture whatever light is happening in that time frame. So if you were to move a candle across the screen for 30 seconds, whatever you paint it in, that's the paint that's going to appear on the image for 30 seconds. However, an intervalometer allows you to keep that shutter open for as long as you want. So for example, if you want to keep it open for 6 hours and capture a photo of the stars going across the sky, that's how you see those crazy star photos where you see the star trails moving across the sky. You used an intervalometer. So fourth tool, intervalometer. The next tool that I would recommend you have is an emergency beacon. And this is essentially just a small little, I want to say just like a little robotic device. It kind of looks like a GPS unit, one of those old school ones. And essentially what it does is it's a button and you just open it up and you hit this button, and no matter where you are in the world, somebody will come and help you. Now, you're obviously only supposed to hit it if you're in a dire situation where you're literally about to die and you're trapped, but it's great for having peace of mind, especially if you're a solo hiker, you go on a lot of adventures by yourself, or if you're going to third world countries or remote parts of the world. It can be a great thing to have just in case something goes wrong. You don't want to end up like the guy on 127 hours where you have to cut off your hand. You could literally just hit a button and someone will come and save you. These things are a little bit expensive. They generally run for like $300 to $500, but they generally last about 7 years. So you just have to replace them after that. So emergency beacon. And the last two things I'd recommend are spare batteries and spare SD cards. SD cards are essentially the little, it looks like a small floppy disk that you keep all of your data on. So whenever you take photos, they get transferred into your SD card. So the idea is to just have a bunch of SD cards and a bunch of spare batteries laying around. I keep extras in my camera bag, I keep them in my car, I keep them in my pockets, I keep them literally everywhere so that no matter what, if you forget one, you leave it somewhere. These things are so small, they're so easy to lose, especially if you have the micro SDs that they're literally the size of your thumbnail. So having them everywhere can be great, especially if you're on a hike. You just hike 10 miles up a mountain for sunrise, you get to the top, realize you left your SD card in your computer. Well, guess what? You have a spare one in your backpack just for this purpose. So you can take it out of your backpack and boom, you're good to go. You didn't miss out on this huge hike just for the SD card that you forgot. So spare batteries, spare SD cards. So those are the 7 items that I would highly recommend having to enhance your photography experience. Now, there's a million different guides online telling you all these different things that you can buy, but these, in my 5 years of shooting so far, have been the things that have been the most essential. A lot of other things are just gimmicks, extra things to carry around, which you don't need when you're hiking. So on that note, I'm gonna go through a few things that you might think you need, but you actually don't for adventure photography. So the number one thing that a lot of people ask about is, do I need a flash? And the answer is no. You don't need a flash if you're doing adventure photography. There will never be a moment where you need to light up a scene with a flash. So that is where the portable RGB light can come in. You can simply light up a scene. I would say that learning flash is a pretty difficult skill, and it's more suited for a studio environment. So if you're in a certain studio, that's where you want to learn flash. If you're out in the field shooting, you don't really need it. If you're doing portraits, maybe, but generally I like to rely on natural light or just the portable light that I have because it's much easier to use than getting a flash. So you don't need a flash. On that note, also reflectors, you don't really need a reflector. A reflector is basically this giant circular silver or gold thing that can reflect the sunlight to light up a certain object. Perhaps if you're shooting a very small scene like a rock, then you can use a reflector, or they're mainly used for portraits and you would generally need an assistant or another tripod to hold it up. So I wouldn't say they're worth bringing around everywhere. So you don't need reflectors, you don't need flash. Another thing you don't need is a gimbal, and gimbals are mainly used for videography. Essentially what they do is you mount your camera on it and it stabilizes the camera. So if you're walking, it will make it so it's a very smooth footage instead of feeling your footsteps. There was a point early in my photography career where I'm like, I'm not even gonna use a tripod. I'm just gonna carry a gimbal with me everywhere. That way I can vlog and take photos at the same time and not have to worry about having a tripod. Don't make the same mistake I did. I blew like $500 or $600 on one of these things and then realized that it's a pain in the ass to walk around and balance this gimbal everywhere you go. So you don't need a gimbal unless you're getting into serious videography. Lots of videography shots you can capture handheld or with a tripod. You just gotta be really sturdy. And there's a few techniques you could look up to learn how to stabilize. For example, if you put a camera strap around your neck and then attach it to the camera, this will help stabilize the camera. Little things like that that you can get away with just so you don't have to buy it and carry around a gimbal. Another thing that you don't need is a L bracket or a case on your camera. A lot of people think they need extra metal around their camera to protect it. And I'm gonna get into this a bit more in the care section, the care video. But I would just say you don't need them. They're just a pain. They're more weight on your camera. They make it clunkier. The reason I shoot mirrorless is because I want to be carrying around a very lightweight camera anyway, and just adding a huge hunk of metal cage to it is just not worth it to me, especially if you have gear insurance. If you have insurance anyway, then if you drop it, it's covered. You don't need to worry about carrying this clunky thing around. So one more thing that you might not need is a monopod. And a monopod is like a tripod, except it's essentially a single stick that you balance on. It allows you to move your camera around like this while keeping it stabilized. Monopods are generally great for sports photography. I don't usually count that in the adventure photography world. Personally, I don't shoot sports ever, so I would never find a use for a monopod. A potential use that you might have for it is for birds. If you have a very long lens and you don't want to have to hold it in your hands, you don't have that precision balance, and you can put it on a monopod and that will help you track it a little bit easier. But that's really the only use that I can think of for a monopod. All right, so that is my video on accessories. Only get the things you need. You're probably gonna end up skimming down, but it seems happens to every photographer is right when you start getting into photography, you just buy a ton of shit that you think you're gonna need, then you realize the things that you actually need. So don't be too hard on yourself if you end up buying a lot of stuff you don't need. It happens to everybody. So let's go ahead and hop into the next video.